Africa's agriculture future depends on its youngest minds. Now, with over 70% of Africans under the age of 30, youth-led innovation is poised to transform the continent's agricultural landscape. We're joined by Brian, Monica, and Ishmael to better explain or help us explore how young entrepreneurs, farmers, and innovators are staging technology, creativity, and passion to drive sustainable growth, boost food security, and stage Africa's agriculture sector. On the manual way, we are reducing employees here and we are using machinery. Is it something as a youth from where you sit that you embrace it?
Thank you very much. As has been said, technology is very, very important. But even before we reach technology, we have to acknowledge that young people are playing an important role in coming up with solutions to address the food security challenge that we have in Africa. Because we know that we have less than 6 years remaining before the lapse of the Sustainable Development Goals, but our continent is very far away from achieving SDG 2 on zero hunger, and most importantly as well, SDG 1 on no poverty, because we know that agriculture is the backbone of our economies, and it's the largest employer in our labor force. And therefore, in the last 3 months, we as Youth Agri-Champions, and through the guidance of the Ban Ki-moon Center, we came up together, Youth Agri-Champions from Ghana, from Kenya, Nigeria, Zambia, and Rwanda. And funnily enough, the population of these countries is a third of Africa, because this is over 400 million people living in this area. And we came up and we looked at some of the challenges that we face, and we formulated 3 demands to address these challenges, which are in this demand paper. And in this demand paper, we call upon world policymakers to first and foremost simplify and streamline access to international climate finance. Even as we talk about reforming the international financial architecture, we have to acknowledge that the process of applying for these funds is not possible for a young farmer. Imagine asking a young farmer to provide financial documents, business plans, business registration certificates. Surely, how are they going to do that? And they are most of the time in the rural areas where government services are not even reachable. So that is a major challenge, because we also know that most of Africa's population is not in the urban centers in Kigali, in Nairobi. They are in the rural areas. This is where most of the farming also happens. Our second demand was on localization of data and information dissemination, and that is where technology comes into.
And
technology is very...
Yes. How are you using that data to move into the agriculture sector?
Absolutely. And now what is happening is that, and I'll give you a solution that is being run by our fellow Youth Agri-Champion, Sumaya Juma. What we have been doing is that we combine the scientific technology with the information from the local farmers. Because what we forget is that there is no technology in the world that will ever beat the lived experience of somebody who has lived on their land for generations. Even as we talk about trying to use drones, trying to use sensors to detect the soil moisture and the soil temperature, the nutrient, the pH level, we have to acknowledge first and foremost that these communities had their own traditional methods. For example, for detecting weather patterns. In our own community, we also had ways of detecting the types of pests that would be in this area and what time they would be available. And we also had our own biological solutions to deal with that. So even as we talk about incorporation of technology, and that is in our demand, we have to incorporate local methods, because we cannot treat it like a prison of binary ideas. It's scientific versus traditional. There has to be a combination of both. And technology is not just about accessing it, but also disseminating information. So how are we going to disseminate this information to local farmers? So are we talking to them in a language that makes sense to them? If we are explaining the pH level, are we telling them in scientific terms or in a way that they can understand? And our last demand, of course, was to ease access to land. Again, technology comes with land, because there are so many things that can be done in implementing land mapping programs, for example, to reduce the extent of conflicts happening between communities, and also to improve documentation of land, awareness of the importance of women owning land. We know that there are some communities and countries in Africa where women are not allowed to own land until today, which is sad. So that's in a nutshell.
Just before I let you go, how are you using this same technology to access new markets and new customers in the sector?
Absolutely. Technology, as I said, plays a big role in the production, but also in accessing markets, because e-commerce has actually played a very important role for us as youth agripreneurs. I can give you an example of my own organization at Policy Action Initiative, where we have been producing vegetables through hydroponics. We've been selling these vegetables through the use of mobile apps, We've put our vegetables on online selling platforms such as Jumia, where anybody can access them and purchase them. So that is for us our main method, because we have to understand that the traditional concept of selling, the traditional concept of taking the food from the production, from the farmer to the market has changed. These days, with the access of technology, this is one area that we young people are leveraging, and that's why we are calling upon for more investment and more support and more rollout of these technologies. Like in Rwanda, I like the USSD code, for example, that they have that young farmers can access. So can we also have the same in Kenya, in Zambia, in Uganda, in Egypt, in Morocco, any country across Africa?
Just on that, before I bring you in, we'd love to understand because here we have Vuba Vuba, which is a snap when it comes to ordering. Is this something you're looking forward to tapping into?
Absolutely.
Your insights on.
I do want to add, e-commerce is key. And actually it was at this forum just a couple of days ago that there was an exchange of African partners with Chinese partners, because the Chinese also had a state of play where they needed e-commerce to actually scale certain processes. And so what Brian alluded to, that e-commerce has a big future, I believe it is within the youth to actually tap into it. So I just wanted to add the discussions here between Africa and China are just a start that will actually hopefully accelerate e-commerce in the future.
Just on that, before I jump to Ismail on the policy.
And on e-commerce, if I may, Derek.
Yes, please.
So e-commerce, it's putting aside all borders. It's disrupting the way we do business. So right now, if we take any example like Uber, the software and the companies are in California, but they are getting money and they're not paying taxes to anybody about it. So the e-commerce, it's almost a race. If we don't get in it right now, we're going to be over. And that's where youth is very important again. It's youth, but also preparing the youth, providing them with the skills they need to develop it. Because it's really very disrupting. And one of the countries that did it the most is China, definitely. China, it has been going on. It has been almost fully electronized in 2015, 2016. So it has been a long time. But in Africa, what we have been seeing also is quick pickup of technologies. So Kenya, for example, at certain time was the highest number of electronic banking systems in transactions. So it could. So that's where, when we talk about leapfrogging development, I think technology is a potential, and e-commerce and anything everything electronic with the E that started with the E could be very important.
So when we dive into the policies or the regulations that are made, these are governing, of course, both in the private sector and on the government side. What few policies do we have in place that the youth can move on? The youth, like Brian, can move on in terms of the agriculture sector.
Thank you for that question. Youth is naturally, unfortunately, not at the decision-making tables of policymakers.
Which it should be.
Which it should be, because youth is 70%, if not even 75% of the continent.
Yes.
75% of the continent. So youth is not only the future, but it's the present. So there are some countries that are really doing a great job, and Rwanda is one of them, that are really incorporating youth at all levels, in the ministries, in the parliament. I know that even the president has a council of youngsters coming to him every year, reporting on the various issues that the country is facing. We spoke to the Minister of Agriculture just before, and he vouched for the Agricultural Ministry has youth voices represented.
Even in the media, we do, you can't see me here.
So there you go. And similarly, we just spoke, for example, also to the former Deputy Minister of Ghana of Agriculture. There is a whole youth council, a committee that is advising policy. But needless to say, youth is often, as I said, not in the climate conferences, not necessarily in the fora where they are heard. So this is where the Ban Ki-moon Center tries to come in. We hear from the ground what is needed, and people like Ban Ki-moon and our co-chair Heinz Fischer and our stellar board members are taking the recommendations of the young people and are bringing them to decision makers, and not only in Africa, but in Europe. Because Europe, and I'd say OSCE countries all together, they do need to contribute more to financially invest into the youth of Africa and into the future. So we are trying to up investments, financial investments and financial commitments on adaptation, and we try to up political commitments, because often finances follow political decisions. So it is Ban Ki-moon and the like who are speaking out and are taking young agri-champions along. And you can't imagine how impactful it is if a Kenyan agri-champion is handing over the demands in presence of the Ban Ki-moon Center, or ideally Ban Ki-moon, to the Kenyan Minister of Agriculture, or to the German Minister of Agriculture, or the UK one. So this is what we are trying to do, to really link the generations.
Brian, is it something you feel like should be part of as the youth when it comes to policy making, especially in key sectors that contribute to the economy?
Yes. And most importantly as well, building up on what Monica has said very brilliantly, is that we have to remember that youth is not a homogeneous demographic. It cuts across everywhere. And it's not just young men, there's also young women, there's also indigenous communities, there's also minorities as well. So it cuts across everywhere. And everyone has different needs that need to be taken account. And that is why we as young people, we are not just calling for more young representation in, let's say, a youthful Minister of Agriculture. That will not move the needle. For example, if I'm from an indigenous community, that will not move the needle if I'm a woman. And that's why we are saying, solve the issues that affect everyone, every young person, irrespective of their nationality, ethnicity, sexuality, religion. And if we solve them, the finance, the information, the land issues, then we will meaningfully participate, not just in the policy, but also in the socioeconomic processes of our country. Because it's very sad when you look at it that there's a high rate of youth unemployment in Africa. Many young people are not involved economically, any processes in the country. That is very sad. And also that is a ticking time bomb if you want to have peace and stability in the continent as well. So if we want, as young people, we have to move the conversation from just having a few more people sitting around the decision-making table to now solving the concrete challenges that affects young people.
I see Isma wants to jump in and drop in a point.
I like very much what Monica and Brian said, and I would add to it that provide an opportunity and a hope to all youth is very important. And I think really for me, we are maybe stuck a little bit with numbers. Do we have enough youth in this council? Do we have enough? No, it's not about that. It's about providing them with opportunities. And the opportunities are very tangible. It's opportunities, it's access to land, as you said, it's access to finance, it's access to data, it's access to information. It's facilitation when they start a business. Don't make it too complicated for them. Allow them. They want to export, they want to import. So for me, really, I like what you said, Brian. It's about making that the system allows them to grow. The system allows them to put their ideas on the ground and make it. And there is a big difference here between least income countries and high income countries. And that's where we need to look.
Now that concludes our episode of how the youth are involved in the agriculture sector. I've been your host, Derek Muhanji.